Welcome to another Disciple Dojo Study Bible Review. Today we're going to be looking at the NASB Light for Life Study Bible by Barbour. Barbour? You guys can correct me in the comments. And before we jump into that, if you haven't already, guys, we are really getting close to hitting 10,000 subscribers. And when we do, we're giving away the entire Anchor Bible Dictionary to one fortunate Disciple Dojo subscriber. So the only way you can be entered to win, and that you will even know when we do that, is if you hit subscribe, click the notifications icon, and stay tuned here on the channel. We're always trying to do giveaways and put resources into the hands of Dojo viewers and subscribers. So it's just our way of saying thank you to those of you that support this ministry. And one other way you can support this ministry is by considering becoming a monthly financial Disciple Dojo donor. We don't have tiered membership. We don't have a Patreon. All we ask is if you appreciate this channel and want to support the ministry of Disciple Dojo, consider partnering with us on a monthly basis at whatever amount you can afford to give. Everything we do is entirely donor funded. So we really appreciate those of you who help keep this thing going. Okay, let's review a study Bible. So the Light for Life Study Bible, it's available in the NASB, and this is the 2020 NASB. Now, I'm not a huge NASB user. I mean, I check it when I'm comparing translations, but I don't really have a favorite version of the NASB. Some people like the 1977 version. Some people like the 95 version. Some people like the 2020 version. Some people hate the 2020 version. I don't really care about any of that. For what it's worth and the little I have used it, I think the 2020 translation is an improvement over the previous versions, primarily because it does things like using contractions. So instead of let us, it'll say let's, which is how normal English speakers talk, and also because it uses gender accurate translation theory. What that means is instead of saying things like brethren or brothers, when it's clear from the context that a mixed gender audience is in view, it translates it as brothers and sisters, which is how the Greek word adelphoi would have been heard in such settings. Now, it doesn't change the gender of God or any of these other scare tactics that people throw out against gender accurate translations, but it is a step towards gender accuracy in translation. And that's something that for some fans of the older NASB translations, they don't like. Personally, I think it's good translation. I think it's accurate, and I applaud the NASB for taking that step. Now, the Light for Life Study Bible, it's 2-columned. It's versified. So each verse is its own line in how they've set the text up. It doesn't follow paragraph formatting. It's verse by verse. Each verse gets its own line, and paragraphs are noted by bold verse numbers. So wherever you see a bold verse number in the text, that's the editor saying, hey, this is a new paragraph. But since this is a verse by verse version, every verse has its own line. Some people love that because it's easy to find verses, especially when they're preaching. Some people don't love it because it breaks the Bible up into these verses that Scripture really was never written with in mind anyway. I'll let you decide which one you prefer, but this is verse by verse. The study notes are included at the bottom of the page, and then under the study notes on each page are the cross-references. So all the cross-references that are noted through italicized superscripts in the text itself, those are found down at the bottom under the study notes. Light for Life Study Bible is a red letter edition, and at the back it has 12 glossy maps. The notes at the bottom of each page are taken from the Layman's Bible Commentary. So that's a non-technical commentary series. It was written, I think Tremper Longman, Mark Strauss, some other pretty reputable scholars worked on it. I'm not sure if they did anything extra in preparation for this Bible or if the editors of this Bible just culled from that commentary series. But that's where the study notes come from. In addition to the study notes, you also have these about one-page articles. I think some maybe go 1.5 pages on different topics. So this one is on what was the Tower of Babel. Here's one from Revelation on what is Armageddon. And then some are character profiles, like this one is one about Abraham. There's also one on Sarah. the different biblical figures. Now, there's no index to these in the back, and there's no list in the front, so you just have to encounter these as you come across them in the text. I didn't find anything that told me these are all of the profiles, these are all of the essays, and this is what page they're on. You also have these little boxes on some of the pages sprinkled throughout, and these are Q&A. So just a question and then a short answer to that question. Not anything super in-depth, and there aren't a lot of these. So you just encounter them as you're going through. Like here's the one in Genesis 22, why did God ask Abraham to sacrifice Isaac? And then a short answer right there. Now, after Revelation, there is a dictionary concordance. It's not very long. It's 24 pages, and the entries, it'll give you the definition of the word or a description if it's a person or a place. And then it'll give you a couple of places in scripture where you can find that term. After that, there are 11 lined pages for notes. And then you come to the maps. All right, so let's pop the hood and take a look at what we're going to find in the Light for Life Study Bible. This is also available, by the way, in a cloth binding and in this brown leatherish binding hardback. So you open it up, you got the contents, then you have introduction that tells about the features that we just looked at. You have a note from the Lockman Foundation, who put together the New American Standard and who owns the copyright to it. And then you have the preface to the New American Standard that explains the principles of translation. There's a section about gender accuracy, about the word brethren, about them using contractions such as let's instead of let us. They tell you which Hebrew text they use, which Greek text they use, how they handle the proper name of God, and then a note on how they handle the Greek tenses. So there's a quick summary explanation of that on this page having to do with the format, abbreviations, and then we're into the Old Testament, right into Genesis. Now, there are no essays. The book introduction to Genesis, this is it. The introduction to Genesis is like 2 or 3 sentences tops. Tells you the author, and then it gives something about the occasion. So you are not getting a lot of introductory notes if you're going to study the book. This is just giving you the bare bones basics. And that goes for the study notes as well. I mean, at the bottom of the page, there's only 3 notes on the first page of Genesis. Usually in study Bibles, the first page of Genesis will have a ton of notes that go with it. But here, just very, very brief comments. And the comments don't get into things like how does Genesis fit with science? What's Genesis ancient Near East background? None of that really. Very, very short notes. So here's an example of the note. Genesis 1:1 through 2:5 says, the initial recipients of this story are the Israelites of Moses' day. Because it is written to the people of God, Genesis is much more of a declaration than a defense. These chapters are not intended to give an account of the creation that would answer all of the scientific problems and phenomena. Rather, an air of mystery permeates these 2 chapters, and within that mystery is the fact that God created this world and it exists within his control. So a very broad, succinct overview, letting the reader know you're not going to get scientific detail, you're not going to get all of your questions answered, particularly in these first 2 chapters of Genesis. Then on the next page, we come to one of these Q&A boxes. This first one, why did God need to rest on the 7th day of creation? And then an essay on the fall of humankind in Genesis chapter 3. This was an interesting study note. I don't think I've come across this note in any other study Bible on Genesis, but in 128, it says God's blessing is a central theme in Genesis. Bless denotes all that fosters human fertility and assists in achieving dominion. Interpreters have generally recognized be fruitful and multiply as commands to Adam and Eve, and later to Noah, see chapter 9, verse 1, as the heads of the human race, not simply as individuals. That is, God has not charged every human being with begetting children. I don't know if I would agree with that. Interpreters have generally recognized this verse to mean that. This is definitely a possible way to read Genesis and the command to be fruitful and multiply, but to my knowledge, it's not a very widespread point that many interpreters, that at least that I've come across in studying Genesis, have gone out of their way to make. When we come to Genesis 6 and the sons of God and the daughters of man, there's a good note at the bottom. Even though it's super short, it is helpful because it notes the different views of who these sons of God and daughters of men are in Genesis. And it spells out what would be called the Sethite view, that the sons of God are those in the line of Seth, and the daughters of man are those in the line of Cain. And so interreligious marrying is what's going on. But it also notes that other interpretations of this passage include the idea that these are marriages between angels and humans, which would be the oldest and some would say the most traditional reading, or between aristocrats and commoners. And that would be something similar to the tyrant king's view. So it was good to see all three views noted in the study note here. However, right after that, in 6:3, they only give one view. His days shall be 120 years, likely refers to the time remaining between the announcement of judgment and the coming of the flood. Right here, it gives you, in this section, it gives you a few of the different interpretive options. In this section, it just gives you one answer. And it's not a space issue. They have easily enough room to include the other interpretation as well. So I'm not sure why they only put that answer in the notes. Now, when we come to Genesis 9, there is a great Q&A box here. Why did God use a rainbow as a sign of the covenant with Noah? And they note the symbolism of the bow, and particularly the bow facing away from the earth. And we talk about this exact issue here on the channel in our video about rainbows and what they meant in the ancient world. So I'll put a link to that in the video description. Be sure to check that out. This is a very short summary that by no means does justice to that question in its entirety, but it does put the reader on the right track. There are also study notes throughout, especially in the genealogy sections here in Genesis 10, for instance, that let the reader know the word son doesn't necessarily mean the immediate son. It can mean descendant or successor, and father is also the word can mean ancestor or predecessor or founder. So it does let the reader know that the genealogies are not exhaustive. They're not like modern genealogies where you get every single generation, but rather that they skip generations or they sometimes refer to people groups instead of individuals. And that's something helpful for readers to know in Genesis. And when we come to Genesis 15, there's a good, again, short but good study note explaining the imagery of taking the pieces of the animal and cutting them and laying them apart from each other and then walking between them, which is what God does in this vision in Genesis 15. So they let the reader know what significance that would have had and what God would have been saying that the ancient audience would have just known because that was a common cultural practice. When we come to Exodus, literally there's a one-sentence introduction to the book of Exodus. The authorship, they posit that it was most likely Moses, and the occasion gives some of the background, but that's really it. That's all you get. And that's with all the introductions to all the books in this Bible. The notes don't go too heavily into the archaeology or into the history itself. They do posit a 15th century dating rather than a 13th century dating for the Exodus. There's a list of the 10 plagues or the 10 signs and where they're found in the text, but there's nothing explaining their significance. There's really nothing in the notes that deal with the different theories of the Exodus location or Mount Sinai's location. If that interests you, we do have a video here on the channel where we go into much more detail in the same series where our rainbow video is. But the notes in this study Bible don't really talk about it. They also don't mention the numbers and the question about whether the numbers of Israelites are literal or whether the numbers are functioning in some sort of non-literal manner. Rather, the notes just pretty much give a quick walkthrough of what's going on. When we come to Romans, once again, very, very short introduction that can't even begin to do justice to what the book of Romans is about. They do give some background to Roman culture in general, like the Pax Romana, how Rome sort of brought peace to the world, but at the edge of the sword. But again, nothing in great detail. When we come to chapter 7, it's unfortunate. The only view that they present is the Augustinian Lutheran view that Paul is speaking about his ongoing struggle with sin in Romans chapter 7. There's no mention of Paul's rhetorical use of the concept of I, or speaking in the first person. It just says the struggle that Paul describes is common to all believers. The more mature the believer, the more aware of sin he or she becomes. The more progress a person makes towards sanctification, the more he or she will abhor sinfulness and see it for what it is. So this is a very standard, again, later Augustinian view of Romans 7. And it is one way to read this text, historically speaking, but it is not the only way, and it's not even the oldest way. So I was disappointed to see no discussion in one of the most contested chapters in the entire book of Romans, which is chapter 7. Then when we get to Romans 9, there are some notes that talk about the issue of predestination and election, but they don't take one side or the other. They just say simply the doctrine of predestination is one that many people avoid, but it's closely tied to the doctrine of God's sovereignty. And they go on to say, in this section, Paul proclaims two paradoxical truths. One, God is sovereign. Two, people are responsible for their choices. Somehow both teachings are true, and God rewards believers' struggle to make sense of them. So they don't take a particular stance. They don't really go into any of the arguments that either Calvinists or Arminians bring to the text. They just kind of say, hey, struggle with this, wrestle with it. This is part of what it means to be a Christian, which is not a terrible approach to something as contentious as the issue of predestination. But again, you're just getting like one or two notes tops. Then when we get to Romans 9, there are some notes that talk about the issue of predestination and election, but they don't take one side or the other. They just say, indeed, Paul's use of the word fullness indicates a positive future for Israel. But they don't really get into who is Israel in Romans 9 through 11. Is it all ethnic Jews? Is it people who are believing in the covenants? Is it some amalgam of the two? There's really no discussion of that. And lastly, we come to Revelation. This was one of the longer introductions. That's not saying much because they're just a few sentences each. But it was nice to see them giving a little more opening background information. There's even a Q&A sidebar here. Is Revelation to be understood literally? And they talk about the difference between prophecy and apocalyptic and letter. So they're orienting the reader to the fact that you can't just read Revelation as a straight literal account of what's going to happen at the end of the world. That was good to see. They also do a good job in chapter 3 on the notes to the background of the church at Laodicea. They talk about Laodicea's water supply and how by the time the water got to the city, it was lukewarm rather than hot, although they don't mention the cold water that they would have brought in from Colossae. And so there's some scholarly argument about whether they would have done that or not. But they also mention things like the banking industry and the clothing of Laodicea and even the medicine, the eye salve that Jesus alludes to. So they did a pretty good job of getting some background information that helps make sense of the passage. They just didn't go very far with it. It's just touched on briefly. In chapter 7, verse 4, on who the 144,000 are, they note the different views. Some believe that these are ethnic Jews who are coming to faith or symbolic of Israel. Others believe that 144,000 is symbolic of the faithful believers, the Christian church. They don't take a stance on it. They just let you know what the two views are. And then in chapter 13, when you come to 666 and the mark of the beast, there's a good Q&A box. What does the number 666 mean? It doesn't spell out the rationale of gematria. It doesn't go into detail of the different suggestions people have given, but it does give two views. One, either 666 is intentionally kind of falling short or mocking the perfect number, which would be 777. So then it's almost functioning as a parody of that. Or it notes that Nero's name in Hebrew equals, when you do the gematria, 666. But again, just one little paragraph. So if you have questions about this, check out our Superhero Seminary video here on the channel where Professor Beastman walks all through the background of this mysterious and often misinterpreted number. I'll link that in the description below as well. But it was good to see some discussion of it, even if it was very brief. However, when we come to Revelation 20, there is a discussion here of the last battle and sort of describing the events of Revelation chapters 19 and 20. But on Revelation 20 itself, there's nothing about the millennium. There's no mention of the different millennial views. There's nada. And that is really bizarre because that is one of the most significant areas of differences in all of Revelation, is how people read this millennium in Revelation 20. So very strange that there was no discussion of it, no study note that even touched on it whatsoever. And so that's pretty much it with the Light for Life Study Bible. That's what you get if you pick one of these up. This is similar. I would compare it to the last study Bible we reviewed here, the NIV Basic Study Bible. In terms of the content and the quality of the notes, I would go with this one. For why I say that, you can see the review here that we did of the NIV Basic Study Bible. But honestly, the Light for Life Study Bible, to me, it was very hit or miss. There are some things I think it did a really good job at. Even though it's sparse, even though it's very condensed, even though you're not getting a lot of content, the content that you are getting in a number of places was really good. But then there were books like Romans, the content I thought was really weak. Revelation, it was pretty good. Overall, it was pretty good, but then there would be some glaring things that they'd leave out, like any discussion of the millennium. So I give this a solid B. So this isn't a bad resource. It's just a very incomplete resource. If you're looking for quick, compact, then this wouldn't be bad to have. But I probably wouldn't go out of my way to recommend that, yes, you need this on your shelf. As I've said before about some of the other study Bibles here that aren't great primary study Bibles, but that are useful to have. I think everything you get in this, honestly, you're able to find in pretty much any of the other study Bibles out there, along with more. So that's my opinion. A viewer sent me this copy in the mail to review and just asked for my honest thoughts on it. So to the viewer who did that, thank you for giving me the chance to review a Bible that I probably wouldn't have picked up on my own. It's good to know what it is. It's good to know that it's out there. And these are my honest thoughts on it. I will say it is put together very well. Even though it's a hardback, it feels like you're holding kind of a leather Bible. It's very sturdy. And even how it's laid out, I mean, for this format of Bible, it's laid out pretty nice. So those are my thoughts. I would love to hear yours. If you've used this study Bible, tell me what you think. If you have a preference between the NASB 77, 95, and 2020, why? What is your preference? What does it matter? I ask honestly, as somebody, again, NASB is not my go-to. I've never really used it very much. I've consulted it at times, but I don't really have an allegiance to any of the editions like I know some people out there very much do. So if you're one of those people, let me know why. Tell me your thoughts on it. Thanks for watching. As always, we'll see you back here next time at Disciple Dojo. Keep training.